As a musical style and as a culture, hip-hop is everywhere. It's on the charts, at award shows, in commercials, even in kids' movies. In 2017, hip-hop surpassed rock as America's #1 stream genre. Its dominance today is unquestionable. But where did hip-hop come from? What was it like at the beginning? This is everything you need to know about old school hip-hop. Hip-hop started in the Bronx, a borough of New York City in the early 1970s. On August 11, 1973, Jamaica-born Clive Campbell, a.k.a. DJ Kool Herc, spun records at his sister Cindy's back-to-school party. He used 2 turntables, which was practically unheard of at the time, and invented the merry-go-round method. He would play 2 copies of the same record and switch between the drum solo, also known as the break. By fading between the breaks on each turntable, DJ Herc created a beat. This style of DJing formed the basis for hip-hop. 2 years later, in 1975, Theodore Livingstone, who would later be known as Grand Wizard Theodore, invented the scratching technique when his mother told him to turn his music down. Theodore, who was only 12 or 13 at the time, was playing records in his bedroom. When his mom began banging on the door, he turned the music down and put his hand on the record. His hand was moving back and forth and he could hear the sound it made in his headphones. He played around with the technique and later called it scratching. The following year, in 1976, Joseph Sattler, a.k.a. Grandmaster Flash, developed the peekaboo system. He spliced wires together in order to preview the record and know where the break was before the audience did.
I went to Radio Shack and bought what's called a single pole double throw switch, whereas in the center it would be off. When you clicked it to the left, you pre-heard the left turntable, and when you double clicked it over to the right, you pre-heard the other one. This enabled me to pre-hear what it was that I was doing, and the mixers of that time didn't have crossfader, so I was actually doing it with an up and down sort of mixer. So I took a mic mixer and just totally converted it.
That's the illest story I've ever heard in my life, man.
Hip-hop grew from the house parties of the South Bronx and spread rapidly amongst friends and neighbors at block parties. Boom boxes would play during recess at local schools and kids would rap over the beat. Within a few years, the sound of hip-hop could be heard throughout the South Bronx, but it wasn't on the radio or being sold in record stores. Hip-hop was heard live at parties or distributed on homemade cassette tapes. In the late 1970s, Sylvia Robinson, who would later be known as the first godmother of hip-hop, wanted to take it to the next level. She conceived and produced the first commercially successful rap record. She originally approached DJ Kool Herc and other rappers to make an album after hearing an MC rap over a beat at a party, but they all turned her down. Then her son, Joey, showed her a rapping pizza guy at Crispy Crust in Inglewood, New Jersey, known as Big Bank Hank. He, along with other wannabe rappers Wonder Mike and Master G, became the Sugarhill Gang, named after an artistic community in Harlem. Sylvia enlisted Grandmaster Cass to write for the new group. He gave her old rhymes he'd written and wasn't using. She also brought in a band to play 16 measures of Chic's Good Times on repeat for her group to rap over. The result was Rapper's Delight, a 14-minute song recorded in one take. DJ Herc and Grandmaster Cass criticized the track as not real hip-hop, and the group was later sued by Chic for copyright infringement. But Rapper's Delight was a hit, and suddenly, hip-hop was reaching beyond the streets of the South Bronx. In the early 1980s, Fab Five Freddy, who would later go on to host SabiaMTV Raps, became a bridge for hip-hop and the mainstream culture. Though part of the same city, the South Bronx and the art scene of Manhattan were worlds apart. Freddie, who counted amongst his friends Andy Warhol, Keith Haring, and Madonna, brought the new sound to the cultural icons of the day. Soon, hip-hop cassette tapes began to circulate throughout New York City. By the mid-1980s, hip-hop had become an underground community of artists and independent labels. One group that emerged during this time from the hottest section of Queens in New York City was Run DMC. Founded in 1983 by Joseph Simmons, Daryl McDaniels, and Jason Mizell. While working on their third album, 1986's Raising Hell, the group played the beat to a classic rock song on their turntable. They planned to rap over the song's intro, a longtime favorite of early hip-hop DJs. Their producer, Rick Rubin, suggested they instead do a cover and collaborate with the original band. Though it took some convincing, they eventually recorded Walk This Way with Aerosmith, which changed the game for hip-hop entirely. The track became the first rap song to be played on mainstream radio. When MTV began playing the music video, hip-hop officially broke out of its niche, reaching Middle America and soon the rest of the world. The genre had come a long way from block parties of the 1970s, but it still remained true to its genesis. Hip-hop isn't about just one thing. In fact, it's made up of 4 distinct but important elements. These elements were first combined in the 1983 film Wild Style and have been considered part of the foundation of hip-hop ever since. The 4 foundational elements of hip-hop are DJing, MC or rapping, breakdancing, and graffiti. Let's look at all of them. The DJ is the backbone of hip-hop. Hip-hop's earliest founders were mainly DJs, and a strong, rhythmic beat is a unifying factor across the genre. Beat making is a complex art form that has continued to evolve since the early days of hip-hop. Before DJ Kool Herc changed the game, the DJ's main job was simply to spin records at parties, clubs, and on the radio. But Herc realized the energy on the dance floor increased during the breaks of the song. His innovations and creativity made DJing an art form unto itself and created a platform for MCs to begin rapping over the beat. Originally, DJs were talking during different parts of the records so as not to lose the attention of the audience. Kool Herc developed the rhythmic spoken delivery of rhymes over the instrumental sections. This style of lyrical chanting and wordplay was inspired by the Jamaican tradition of toasting. But with their hands busy on the turntables, they needed an MC to come in and help amp up the crowd. Herc enlisted his friend, Kool Herc, to control the mic. At one party, he dropped a line. "There's not a man that can't be thrown, not a horse that can't be rode, a bull that can't be stopped. There's not a disco that I, Kool Herc, can't rock." This is considered to be the first rap lyric, and Kool Herc the first hip-hop MC. DJ Kool Herc is also responsible for coining the terms B-boy and B-girl. Dancers would form a circle on the dance floor, showing off their moves and saving their best for the breaks. Herc began calling them B-boys and B-girls, short for break boys and break girls. Breaking began as a way for kids in the Bronx to be recognized beyond the street violence that plagued their communities. The style has its roots in African American, Afro-Caribbean, and Latino music. Over time, breaking evolved and became a global subculture that transcended into the mainstream. Though graffiti existed before the birth of hip-hop, it became a visual expression that resonated with the DJs, MCs, and breakdancers of hip-hop. Some of the pioneers of graffiti were directly involved in the birth of hip-hop, including Fab 5 Freddy. Today, some of the founders of hip-hop, early graffiti artists, and scholars say that while there is a connection between graffiti and hip-hop, it should not be considered one of the core elements. However, the art forms do share a stylistic and cultural connection. One central tenet of hip-hop from the very beginning has always been the politics. Hip-hop is about getting people to notice you on a personal level and as a political stance. Since its inception, it has been used by artists to express their identity in politics and as a response to the world around them. In an interview with Spin magazine, Public Enemy's Chuck D said, "Rap is Black America's TV station. It gives a whole perspective of what exists and what Black life is about. It reports on the lived experiences of the people who create it." While disco was thriving elsewhere, the inner city kids felt the genre wasn't for them. Hip-hop became their rebellion against and recreation of disco, finding a way to fit it into their own lives. Hip-hop began as a party, but always had a message. Block parties were spaces for friends, neighbors, and families to connect. The sound came from African Americans and immigrants, mostly from the Caribbean and Latin America, converging in the same neighborhood. And with the substantial poverty in the South Bronx at the time, most young people didn't have the money for instruments. So the turntables became their instruments. Lyrics reflected life in the inner city because they came from the people who lived there. The words described the social and economic factors they lived with every day. Africa Bambaataa, also known as the Godfather, was a pioneer in hip-hop. He founded the Zulu Nation, originally known as the Organization, to unite the youth in his community through hip-hop and offered music as an alternative to gangs. Hip-hop and politics, civil rights and justice are inextricably linked and have been since the beginning. That continues to this day. It is impossible to overstate the impact of old-school hip-hop on the cultural landscape of the 21st century. It revolutionized music and forever altered mainstream society. You can hear hip-hop influences in nearly every popular song of the last 30 years. Pop, rock, dance, and even country music wouldn't be the same without it. Fashion, movies, visual arts, kid shows, and even exercise have all been touched by hip-hop. In 1988, MTV launched Yo! MTV Raps, which became the first place to see music videos, new songs, and interviews with hip-hop artists on TV. It quickly rose to become one of the most successful shows on MTV. It launched the careers of countless hip-hop stars. It was one of MTV's first globally televised shows, which helped spread hip-hop across the world. That same year, Public Enemy released Fight the Power, which also served as an anthem for Spike Lee's seminal 1989 film, Do the Right Thing. By the 90s, hip-hop had expanded across the country and a new type of sound was coming out of California. Rappers like Snoop Dogg, Tupac, and NWA took the sound born in the Bronx and made it their own. Soon, rappers in the Midwest and Southern states did the same. Artists like Eminem, Nelly, and Ludacris gave hip-hop a new sound and a new direction. The genre also began to spread internationally with groups popping up in France, Japan, and soon all over the world. The UK has had a strong hip-hop scene since the 1980s and continues to expand the genre with influences from Afrobeat and grime. Contemporary hip-hop now includes artists of all genders and races. It is truly an inclusive genre. And with global megastars like Lil Nas X, 24K Golden, Megan Thee Stallion, and Polo G paving the way for a new generation, it's clear the legacy of the old school hip-hop greats is still thriving. Today, hip-hop is fully a part of mainstream culture. Yo! MTV Raps is back and brand new for the 21st century, uniting the legacy of old school hip-hop with contemporary artists and fans. And while the genre is evolving and changing all the time, it hasn't lost that counterculture edge from the early days. Old school hip-hop gave us groups who are still influential today, including Public Enemy and Run DMC. But it also gave the world an ethos and a form of expression for the underrepresented Black community. The pioneers of old school hip-hop created a beat that the world is still rhyming over. The information in this video came from these sources. Check them out to learn more.